Welcome to It's Good to Be Smart. I'm your host, Dr. Dave Mulder. I love to learn new things, and I hope you do too, because it's good to be smart. In this episode, we're diving into a big question that every biologist has to grapple with at some point. We see life everywhere on this planet, and it shows up in so many different ways. But have you ever stopped to wonder, where did all this life come from? Did it just appear out of nowhere? Did living things come from non-living things? Or is there another explanation? Let's take a journey through history to find out. For a long time, people believed in an idea called spontaneous generation. Spontaneous generation is the idea that living things could come from non-living things. Sounds strange, right? But many people in history thought this was true because of what they observed. For example, people believed that rotting meat could turn into maggots. If you left a piece of meat out in the open, maggots would suddenly appear. And since people couldn't see tiny fly eggs with their eyes, they thought the meat itself was creating the maggots. Another common belief was that frogs poofed into existence from muddy ponds, and that geese grew from barnacles. Yes, you heard that right. Some people thought that certain types of barnacles on driftwood turned into geese. Ancient philosophers like Aristotle supported the idea of spontaneous generation. He thought that certain forms of life, like insects and worms, could just appear from things like dew, mud, or even the warmth of the sun. And because Aristotle was such an important thinker, his ideas stuck around for centuries. But it wasn't just ancient philosophers who thought about life coming from non-living things. One famous example, trying to support the idea of spontaneous generation, came from a scientist named Jean-Baptiste von Helmont in the 1600s. He did a kind of experiment where he put a dirty shirt and some wheat in a box, and in a few weeks, he found mice inside. He believed the mice came from the wheat and the dirty shirt. Now that might seem like an easy thing to make fun of today, but it's important to remember that von Helmont was trying to explain his observations in clear, straightforward ways. He was incorrect, of course. We know that mice only come from other mice, not from sweaty clothes. Over time, scientists began to question spontaneous generation. Through careful experiments, they discovered that living things can only come from other living things. This idea is called biogenesis. Biogenesis is the principle that life can only come from life. That means that all living organisms today came from previous living organisms, whether it's bacteria, plants, animals, or humans. This concept is important because it explains how life continues and passes from generation to generation. Every tree, every insect, every person exists because of a long, unbroken chain of life that stretches back over years and years. Without biogenesis, we wouldn't have ecosystems, food chains, or even human civilization as we know it. Scientists today all agree that biogenesis is the correct explanation for how living things arise, and spontaneous generation is no longer considered a valid idea. But if life doesn't come from non-living things, where did the first life come from? Scientists have been working to answer this big question for a long time. In the 1920s, a Russian scientist named Alexander Oparin suggested that living things on Earth could have come from non-living chemicals that combined under certain conditions to form organic compounds. Remember that organic compounds are molecules that contain carbon. They're the basic substances needed for life, like sugars, fats, proteins, and even DNA. Oparin's hypothesis proposed that life on Earth arose from simple organic compounds that formed in the early Earth's atmosphere and oceans through chemical reactions. These simple organic compounds then combined in certain ways to create more complex organic compounds, eventually leading to the formation of the first cells. Does this theory sound like spontaneous generation? Many scientists have debated Oparin's hypothesis because while it sounds reasonable, the general consensus is life can only come from life. In the 1950s, two American scientists, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey, thought up a way to test Oparin's hypothesis. They designed and conducted a famous experiment to try to figure out how life might have begun on Earth. The Miller-Urey experiment was designed to simulate Earth's early conditions. They created a closed system of glass tubes and containers, and they filled this apparatus with gases that they thought were in the Earth's early atmosphere, like methane, ammonia, hydrogen, and water vapor. Then they used electrical sparks to mimic lightning. After running their experiment, they found that some simple organic compounds had formed. Their experiment seemed to be a success. It produced a variety of amino acids, which are the building blocks of the proteins that cells use to build all kinds of structures. The Miller-Urey experiment was exciting to many scientists because it showed that some of the chemicals needed for life could form under certain conditions. But, and this is really important, no living things came from this experiment. It didn't create life, though the experiment did result in some of the ingredients that life needs. So, while the Miller-Urey experiment helped scientists understand the chemistry of life's beginnings, it didn't fully answer the question of where the first life came from. So what do you think? Did the Miller-Urey experiment provide evidence for where life comes from? Scientists still debate and research this question, and it remains one of the biggest mysteries in biology. Before we wrap up, here are a few fun facts about the question of where life comes from that might fascinate you. The word biogenesis comes from Greek, meaning life from life. Even though Miller and Urey's experiment didn't create life, some organic molecules that were formed in their experiment have been found in meteorites, suggesting that the building blocks of life might exist even in space. While the Miller-Urey experiment was successful in some ways, scientists now believe they were wrong about the gases they used in their experiment to simulate Earth's early atmosphere. While Miller and Urey used chemicals like methane and ammonia and hydrogen sulfide, scientists today think Earth's atmosphere was probably mostly carbon dioxide and nitrogen gas. The results of Miller and Urey's experiment would have probably turned out quite differently using these gases. Some scientists are now studying deep-sea hydrothermal vents to learn more about how life might have begun in Earth's extreme environments. These deep-sea vents release chemicals similar to the ones Miller and Urey used in their famous experiment, so we'll have to see what scientists continue to discover in these investigations. Okay, let's recap what we learned in this episode. Many people once believed in spontaneous generation, the idea that life could come from non-living things, but we now know that this isn't true. Today, people believe that life comes from other living things, and this idea is called the theory of biogenesis. But the question of where life came from on Earth is one that scientists have continued to wrestle with. The Miller-Urey experiment helped us understand how some organic compounds might have formed on the early Earth, but the exact origin of life is still a mystery that scientists are trying to solve. The theory of biogenesis is important because it helps biologists understand how life continues and how it changes over time. The key idea is this: life comes from life, and every living thing is part of a long, unbroken chain stretching back through Earth's history. Thanks for joining me in this episode, and nice work leveling up your brain power today. Remember, smart isn't something that you are, it's something we become as we're learning. So keep listening, keep learning, and keep getting smarter every day. It's Good to Be Smart is created and produced by me, Dr. Dave Mulder, with the support of the National Science Foundation through the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program. Subscribe to this feed so you'll never miss an episode, and check out our home on the web, goodtobesmart.com. Until next time, keep asking questions, stay curious, and keep learning, because it's good to be smart.